The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. My name is Ray Arel. The Agile Coaching Network, if you don't know, is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. The Agile Alliance is a non-profit organization. I've been a member for the Agile Alliance for, well over, I would say, 5 years. And I can tell you as an organization, it's one that isn't trying to just go off and sell you stuff and, trying to get you certified in a particular area or, just in general. It's more of an encompassing look at Agile and how Agile goes off and intercepts with all things that it has touched so far. If you want to go up and take a look, go up to agilealliance.org. Again, become a proud member, and that helps us to continue our mission and our goals. This might be a slightly different type of format than you typically go to when you go to, say, a webinar or a live event itself. This is a panel that's made up of everyone who's on the call. And the goal here is to get the conversation going with all of us that are here. And the podcast, we are currently crossing over some really great numbers. We actually got voted as one of the top 10 Agile podcasts that are out in the industry today. And I'm very proud of that. And that could not have happened without you all listening. And then lastly, have fun and amplify your learning to the greater Agile community. We have well over 10,000 people who have been to the live event, and we've going out to well over 60,000 people who've listened to actually 160,000 that's listened to the actual podcast itself. So it's a great place to amplify your learnings. And even if you're new to Agile, it's important that your perspective be added to the conversation, because what we found is that for some of us that's been doing it a while, there are some new things that are out there that we want to know about. And the only way that we can hear about that is to hear about your experience as well. I'm joined with a couple of regulars today. Regulars on our staff, they vary from time to time. But today we have Jorg and Deanna that are here, and I just enjoy having them, hearing their perspective on things. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So the top question that was up on Slido for a couple of weeks, and we've had a couple of other topics that kind of preempted this, but I think it's important for us to start to kind of dive into some of these questions and work down our backlog of questions that are there. But the top voted one up there was, are there any recommendations for implementing Agile on a team that is not developing software? And just to give you a little perspective on this, at least my mindset is and I kind of struggle a little bit with the term of things that are not software, because at least in my universe, even though that I might be doing, say, a mechanical design or some other thing that might not be considered developing software, I am using software in order to go deliver that. And some of the methodologies and methods that we use for iterative development and the mindset of Agile, if you take the 12 principles and you consider it to be sort of the Agile mindset, it's directly applicable. And I noticed as I was saying that, Diana, your microphone went live. Do you got something to add on this?
Well, York's was already live, so I don't know. Maybe he should go first. Yeah.
Okay. No matter. Go ahead.
Okay. I actually do think it depends on the kind of team it is. And if you are talking about a team that is made up of people that we would call knowledge workers, it's a team that has to do some creative thinking, it has to work with manipulating information, it has come together as a team and is moving some deliverable forward together, then I think, then Agile applies. If you've got a team of people, I'm doing air quotes here, a team of people in a call center who all have their own individual kiosks and are all working completely separately, dealing with completely different customers, maybe there's some aspects of Agile that will work there, but not so much. If in fact you have teams of knowledge workers, so I'm going to take that as a given, start with making sure that you've really built a team that understands that they need to focus on the value that they're producing and not on the technical mechanics of what they're doing. Understand the importance of collaboration in achieving their goal and the importance of communicating with their business people in a way that the business people understand what's going on in their team. And then the trickiest part of delivering, which is the way we describe it, is very focused on skills and that process. But I've worked with a lot of folks who are working with teams of agencies for marketing teams or other kinds of teams that are also knowledge workers. And we just work with them to sort of figure out, well, what are the best professional skills that these folks would need, and how do we ensure that this team has all the best professional skills and all the tools for working together, and whatever the marketing equivalent of continuous integration is, that they are enabled to do that. And then the optimizing zone really talks about cross-functional teams of all kinds of people, and so that one is even more broadly applicable. But I start from there, and then I look for, well, what does that tell me about the next step that I should do with this particular team? What is it that they're already, where are they already fluent? Where already are they proficient in what they need to bring to working in an agile way, and what else do they need?
Yeah, what I find is too, I mean, if we take just the Agile Manifesto itself,
right,
and specifically, and I know that your model as well as others have done this, I think incredibly well, which is, look at the 12 principles and take the word software out of it, and just read them. And, things like, the developers and businesses working, developers working together with the business daily. Does that happen in your organization? And then think about ways of making that happen, because we know that if the business is talking to the people delivering, we know that they are much more well-grounded in the delivery of value to the customers, because typically in most businesses, that management side is more connected to the customers than the developers. And that's something that, I think that bringing that closer is more effective. Jorg, what's your opinion on this?
A few thoughts. One word struck me, and that's implementing. And I don't think you can implement Agile on anyone, because it's not a finite thing. It's a way of thinking, of approaching things, of looking for benefits and learning, which never ends and never really stops, in a way that I'm putting this onto the team, or the team's putting this onto themselves, and then they are agile and the world is suddenly a different place. That's just not true. Think of what are the benefits you're really looking for. Enable within the team, grow from the team, from the capabilities, from the knowledge. And I believe there are a lot of benefits even for jobs which are pretty much not knowledge work, because to even improving very standard things, knowledge and observance still matter a lot. Just look at what Toyota did on the factory floor. These are not people we normally would call knowledge workers, but their input and their attentiveness mattered a lot to get this done. So I think this is true. And saying that recommendations, don't try to be perfect on day one. I've met too many teams who say, I need to just tweak this practice because it doesn't apply here. Don't do this. Pick something and try it as it is by the book, and learn from that by inspecting and observing, and lead yourselves by formulating an expectation, what you want to get out of this, and then reflect whether your thoughts were right or wrong, and probably you'll be surprised what you learn from the team. Be open.
I think that's really good, because I think also, using Agile to implement Agile is also a good approach. I've seen a lot of adaptions of trying to be more waterfall-y, that if I do these 5 steps or these 2 steps or 1 step, then I am Agile. And I purposely used a robotic voice for that, because, if you meet an Agile team at the most mature level, I've always heard them, you'd ask them, how's your Agile journey? And they'd always say, well, it is a journey. We will always be continuously improving as an organization. And I think that's a good signpost. Let's see. We got a lot of hands that went up as we started this topic. Ben, what do you have?
For me, when I'm talking with groups that want to get in on this adorable Agile stuff,
adorable.
Yeah, I hear everyone's using it, and I think it's really cool. Can we use it too? Okay. I asked them to go back to the basics. In other words, even back, Jorg mentioned Toyota. Who that's delivering any body of work would disagree with identifying wastes and trying to eliminate those wastes, which is kind of the foundational of what we do. The idea of prioritizing your work and trying to deliver the more valuable stuff in smaller increments and getting it out getting your work done quicker in smaller groups so people can use it. It's hard to argue whether you're developing software or not. The idea of getting small amounts of the work done and either finding out if there's business learning or getting business value out of them in small chunks. Those are all elements of what we call Agile, but don't necessarily have to do with delivering software, but with delivering any body of work. And I think when we start talking to people about those those foundational ideas, that's a good entree into whether the elements that we then would use to implement Agile might help.
Right. That's very good. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. Sheila, are you there?
I just wanted to kind of give an experience that I recently had with somebody, and I was working with her to figure out how Agile can apply to her role and her team for HR recruitment. So she works in a recruitment team, and we looked at some of the Agile principles, which some apply and some don't. Iterative type thing is not, you're kind of iterating, I guess, if you look at the variety of candidates that you may be looking at. But we looked at the frameworks and looked at the Agile principles to come up with some options for using an Agile mindset within HR recruiting, which is a little bit different than a lot of other areas, I think. And it was a lot of fun. And if anybody wants to hear more about it, I'm certainly happy to go into that a little bit further. But we did look at using like a lean Kanban approach, and in addition to Kanban, also looking at a time-boxed 1-week Scrum approach. So it's kind of cool looking at Agile from outside the software.
So what would you say that, the key recommendation that you would have for that person? Would it be looking at some of the practices, or what would be the key thing that you would want that person to know?
Well, we were looking at what their processes were and how to streamline that to make it to where it wasn't as chaotic, and that they were able to have things into a backlog using some of these really good techniques from Agile to kind of make the process for this. It is a process, and there are different people that are working, and we looked at I think it was important to see how your team is actually functioning. So their team, the way they function, Kanban looked like a really good approach because they were kind of doing a pull situation where people would pull in a request for candidates and then move it through a certain number of steps. So since this had specific steps, we looked at, creating that flow, which is different from, the time box Scrum. But it was just a matter of reviewing what they were doing and a good approach, and how to have the Agile mindset to where everybody can contribute and they can do work as a team versus working individually.
Cool. Thank you very much for that. Tammy, are you there? I noticed you just put into the box that you love this topic. What do you have on this?
I absolutely love this topic. And when I am very passionate about helping teams apply the Agile values and principles when they're not developing software. So I applaud you, Ray, for going to the values and principles, because I think this question gets confused with applying frameworks with having the benefit from Agile. So I have helped a call center on applying Agile values and principles, being transparent, collaborating, having incremental reflection points for learning and growing and things like that. So I think you can apply the Agile mindset to anywhere, and using frameworks is a way of doing that. So traditional Scrum may not work, or it may, but I think that you can be successful at having the benefit from Agile in non-software development teams.
Right, and just one contrast to what you're saying there, and I'm not sure how many people have done any reading about something called cargo cults. Cargo cults are people who implement a method and they feel that, by just mimicking the actions, I'm going to get the return on what others have gotten from it. And cargo cults, if you go look up on Wikipedia, it came from these islands that during World War II, these cargo planes used to land on these islands, and the local villagers would help to go remove the cargo from them, and they would get some of that cargo as payment. And after the war ended, well, why aren't the planes landing anymore? And they started thinking about things like, well, they used to march in the morning, so let's march in the morning. Let's set up towers and they would mimic the land, the people that had the flags for landing aircraft, thinking that the planes would land. So anytime a plane would fly over, they would mimic these actions and no more cargo would come out. And I see a lot of cargo cults in Agile. They think that they just copy one method and they're going to get those results versus really exploring what they need. So thank you for that comment. I appreciate that.
Can I just jump in here, Ray? And I just want to say to Tammy, thank you for calling me out on the call center thing. As soon as that fell out of my mouth, I knew it was a bad example. so thank you for correcting that. I really appreciate that feedback.
And thank you for allowing me to have a different point of view than a statement. Thank you. It was wonderful.
No problem. Thank you. Jonathan, do you have something to add?
One of the things I'm finding with Agile is that we've got very many different definitions. There are very many different flavors. So if you look at John Kotter's book, Accelerate, he's talking about creating network teams, customer-facing teams, and those are, and if you look at Stephen Denning's book, The Age of Agile, you'll find that he's talking about customer-facing teams and networks of customer-facing teams. So what I'm seeing is Agile teams forming around order processing, goods dispatching, warehousing, and so on, and using the techniques of Toyota to drive customer value, blockages, some of Eli Goldratt's theory of constraints, and identifying the drum, value streams, and value stream mapping, all of that sort of stuff as a major driver towards improving customer focus, reducing costs, and so on. So totally agree with the caller that talked about a call center. I was talking to a guy who has a call center of 20,000 people with a Canadian bank, and he's using these techniques to improve the efficiency of the call center.
Well, thank you. Thank you for those comments. Russ, are you there?
So I agree with most of the comments that have been said, and I'm going to go back even more basic than Diane, which is a lot of what we refer to as Agile is really system thinking. So it's just process stuff. And we can use words like customer value, but teams don't understand that. So I like the idea of starting out with a conversation about what is the purpose of this team? Why is the sponsor paying this team to be here? And yes, you'll get the value of the value to the customer, but you also have that interesting conversation about who are our customers. Very often when you do that, the customer, the people that we're calling customers, turn out to just be enablers or partners, and the end customer, the external customer, the value providing, person that's putting the money into the system is somebody else. And that's a great conversation because it's not personal, but it's interesting, and it gets the collaboration, it gets people talking about themselves as in system terms and seeing the bigger picture. And I like that as a starting point, because then they can start to align with how do we get that out to those customers or fellow enablers? How do we get that out to our partners quicker and more effectively? So I think that's a great starting point.
No, and I think being grounded, I mean, if you look at Agile and a lot of what it centers on is what the customer experience is with your product. And that term customer and versus stakeholder, because there's a lot of stakeholders to your product, but they're not really truly the customer. And I think we get confused a lot of times where I appreciate your input because I've been a product owner for a number of years. And as a product owner, I would tell people that that's great input. But there are some people who have financial interests in this who are in fact, their vote's a little bit higher, and that's hard to hear sometimes, but their vote is higher. Hector, are you there?
Hey, thank you, Ray. How are you?
I'm doing great.
Hey, listen, guys, I love the conversation as well. I'm just bringing a little different perspective, meaning what I like to call what we usually sometimes say is the little c and the big C, meaning the little c is usually your internal users, people that are working with it inside the company, and the big C is the customer that pays us, the one with green dollars. And this Agile methodology or approach really is just, in my opinion, the way I kind of influence others is by telling them that this is just a better way of working, meaning that it's good to develop good software, but if you can work better across the entire supply chain and allow this thing that we call real-time environment, which is how do we respond faster than faster in a high frequency, which is what our customers need. The stand-up model, which allows us to talk to each other every day for 15, 20 minutes, it gives us that real-time aspect as opposed to waiting to see if something works. We want to make sure that we know if it's working as soon as possible, and that continuous improvement is what we're trying to really get to. And it really, at the end of the day, goes back to the customer. The customer is going to feel the effect if we're doing things in real time. That was my summary input.
Great. Yeah, I fully agree with that. Let's take one more comment. Mark, are you there?
Just thinking about etymology of the word Agile, I remember the debate, I think Dave Thomas posted Agile is dead, long live agility. And he pointed out the fact that Agile was an adjective. So the manifesto for Agile software development. And that really stuck with me and kind of changed the way I approach this. And then when I heard Alistair Cockburn say, over the years, Agile got overly decorated, let's get back to the heart of it. And he named 4 activities of collaboration, delivery, reflection, and improvement. And so when I looked at the word Agile and its roots in Latin, the verb is really just to do, to act, or to make. And so I really like this idea of focusing on what we're doing, whatever the definition of business is, whatever we're doing, how do we collaborate to deliver it? How do we deliver it? I mean, that's the whole point. How do we reflect on it, improve it? And even Scrum as an example Agile framework, a lot of people are uncomfortable with theory, but theory is a foundation for practice often. And their theory is based on empirical process control, which says make visible, inspect, and adapt. And that's at the heart of any kind of process improvement. So I just love this idea. I love that people are focusing on principles and values. And one last thing for anybody who's really interested in changing the way we think, which I think is an enabler of any improvement. Look at the SPINE model, which talks about starting at needs, working through principles and values, and only then getting to practices and tools because you'll choose the ones that fit the need ultimately.
I agree with that. And I think the one thing that we as Agile coaches or just coaching in general that we sometimes forget is that we need to enlist people into the cause. The destination isn't Agile. The destination is a better customer experience or a better product or a better blank. It's a business need that we're trying to go address. And enlisting people to the problem, you get some really great innovations that come out. And that, again, is part of the Agile mindset. So Thank you for your comments, Mark. I really appreciate that. So we're going to go ahead and pivot to the next question. The next question is, what are the signs that a team has become too large and should be split? There's a lot of different models in this space that I've seen. There's the magic number of more than, I forget what the number is called, but once you get above 100, then you're really pushing against the fact that not everyone can talk. You're never going to know everyone's name. And then there's other rules like in Scrum where it says, the magic number of 7 plus or minus 2 also comes into play as well. So there's a lot of different schools of thought. But I think, for at least my own personal impression is that when communication gets difficult, and somebody actually typed in Dunbar's number. Thank you very much. I knew it. It was at the tip of my tip of my thumbs differently. So Shauna, I noticed that you joined. Did you have any advice in this area?
Yeah, for me, the things that I start noticing when a team gets too big, you pointed this out, Ray, is that communication really starts breaking down. I often find challenges as to who's the decision makers, and when there's a lot of people, things like how we make decisions, and the bigger the team, especially if you're doing it by committee, becomes way too difficult. And I also start seeing signs like front end and back end will start breaking out their work and working separately because they're big enough of a team to do so. And typically it kind of goes back to the mission and what we're trying to solve. If you have a really large team and if you've broken down the work into smaller pieces, a lot of times there's opportunity to take on, multiple pieces within that larger mission, and it brings more synergy to the smaller groups to go ahead and break those out. And so, a lot of my work is spent sort of looking at helping teams to become high performing and knowing when the team has become too big or when there's opportunity to move faster is one of the things that I look at a lot.
Cool. Do you have the concept of a journey person, the fact that when a team gets too big, do you have the concept that you kind of seed other groups with, stardust? Do you use that?
I haven't heard that term, but we do use the concept of seeding, especially if you're starting a new team from scratch. Bringing somebody who has experience in both practice as well as the software itself really helps kind of jumpstart the team as a whole, for sure.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Jörg, your mic's active. What do you think?
Yeah, one thought here, again, a bit, I prefer if the team does that themselves. So if they tell you that actually something gets cumbersome, that's a really good thing to tell them that they are allowed to self-organize and maybe split. And the second thought is, what's the purpose here? So there might be different levels of team. Probably you want your own entire company to feel like they belong together. So if they meet, they still interact positively, no matter whether they know themselves beforehand. So they're still a team. Never split them. So really look at purpose of what you're talking about here. Is it more identification or more getting work done? And for getting work done, you need smaller groups to be really effective. And if they are good at self-reflection, they probably notice before you notice from the outside. One clear indication is if people start to abstain from whatever communication is happening, be it daily meetings or regular events or not reading newsletters anymore, then probably they are outside of the team suddenly. And one clear indication, if suddenly people talk about them and us, then the split is already there.
Right, this notion of siloing that occurs within organizations and the question of breaking up by function versus by distributed, what is our mission, what is our goal, a mixed distribution of a team. Diana, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just to follow on actually with both what Shauna and Jörg said, just a quick story. One time I was brought in to an organization to just examine their boundary meetings, right? Their product demo, their retrospective, and their planning. And this was a team of 25 people, 7 of whom were in a different location. And so they were on a screen, and we were sitting in a big conference room. And as we went through all of these meetings, part of what I was observing was the fact that there were, I don't know, at least 8 or 10 of those people who, no matter what kind of meeting what part of those 3 meetings we were having, and there were all kinds of other things wrong, but this was one indicator. They had their laptops open and they were doing different work. They weren't really in the meeting. And so in terms of a concrete sign of this team is no longer functioning as a team, we need to figure out, as Jorg said, what are the purposes that are trying to be accomplished here, and let's align on those purposes. It was so visible. And so sometimes, I think both Shauna and Jorg referenced this, you can actually see it. The team is ready to be split. They are already splitting on their own. That's a time to start asking some questions and take action.
I have a funny story that one of my managers that I used to work for back at Intel Corporation had implemented that if the meeting agenda didn't apply to you, don't attend. And it was funny because he came out of his meeting and he was mad. And I said, well, why are you mad? He says, well, because no one showed up. Well, it's like, well, that should have been assigned to you, that maybe that what you wanted to talk about, there wasn't any clear connection to what we were doing. But anyway, let's see. Hey, Jeremy, you're there.
So one of you mentioned communication earlier, and I think one of the smells for me is I see an increasing amount of documentation that isn't serving more of a future purpose, but is really substituting for the type of collaboration that happens on a well-functioning team.
I agree with that. How do you typically would approach, I'm curious, of making the recommendation of splitting a team?
So coming from the UX side, it's usually rarely within my domain to manage that. So the best I can do is hope to have some influence. So usually it's just trying to make other people aware of what's going on and see if they see the same things that I see, and if they're drawing the same conclusions.
Well, leadership is interesting because leadership, both either the top down or coaching or mentoring, you can coach at any particular angle. And I happen to know that you were in UX, so I was kind of baiting you with that question. I apologize, but I wanted to see how typically you would handle that.
Well, I think all of UX is about coaching and influence. So.
Right. Well, thank you, Jeremy. Alex, are you there?
For the meetings that you were talking about, I think it's important to measure the meetings to see some of the Q meetings to see if they are talking about the issues that they are important, if the participants are the ones that has to be there, and if the time is the right amount. And when you start to measure, then you can do something about it.
Okay, so you're saying wrap some measurement systems around it so that you're not just working from an impression, you're actually working from also some, both, quantitative and qualitative data at the same time.
Yeah, correct. If you feel that it's something is not that efficient, you put some measures, easy measures, and then do something about it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. Look, I think I'm getting your name correctly. I apologize if I'm not.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, you got the name right. Thank you for that.
Oh, cool.
So to me, the signs that a team is becoming too large and should be split means there are a lot of side conversations between kind of sub-teams, that you will, which means that people are trying to connect and talk to a subset of the team. That's a big red flag for me that, they might be better off having a conversation in a separate team environment rather than being part of this larger team.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Let's go ahead and head on to, I notice there's not as many hands that are left up here. Let's go ahead and pivot over to a new question. The new question is, what are some of the steps you can take to get my foot in the door doing product ownership and development? It's kind of interesting, the mix of both of those, but it looks like some career advice here for this individual wanting to know what are ways that they can start doing product ownership. Jorg, did you want to step into that?
Yeah, that one is interesting. I'm not really sure whether it's the step from development to product ownership or whether it's about doing a bit of both. My advice is for product ownership, care for the customer benefits and start discussing them and find somebody who already does that well in your context and understand what his thought processes are. That at least was to me extremely valuable, to being told, we as a company cannot officially do that. Unofficially, I'm doing X, Y, that, and my customers love it. So then you can put yourself more easily into the customer's shoes and try to frame your development work in, that's what I'm delivering to the customer, not that's the kind of work I'm doing. If you can start to have those conversations, what are we producing instead of what are we working on, then you're already on a very good way. And normally, no matter how your organization is structured, the people who really want to delight the customer will be really happy to have somebody who is speaking their language and trying to translate it to engineering or whomever. So there should be some people who really will love to have you on their team. Open the door.
So we had a chat comment that Eugene had written that product ownership and development are two separate things. Yeah, Eugene, the questions come in from the audience. So I mean, in some regards, if this individual is here, they can raise their hand and clarify. I thought the same thing. There are some distinct differences between the two buckets. Product owner, though, is directly interfacing and working with the development teams, and they are part of the team. Diana, what do you have?
Well, this is why we need diversity in our teams.
Right.
I read this question completely differently. I read it as, what are some steps I can take to get my foot in the door doing product ownership and product development? And so
sure.
That this is a person who's looking to move entirely into the product ownership, development, management side.
Right.
And so if my take is appropriate here, I'd start looking at some local user groups and or now actually you can attend user groups anywhere in the world because they're pretty much all online. But there are product-oriented user groups and conversations and Slack channels and all of those things that are publicly available. And I'd start getting involved in some of those and then find some people to have some conversations with and do some informational interviews on how did they make the change from whatever they were doing before into what they're doing now. And maybe even in the person's own organization, if they're inside a company, they might be able to find some folks to do that. They're looking for those things and taking on just with almost any kind of new practice area or skill set. I always recommend people look for the opportunity to do it on a volunteer basis somewhere and get some experience under your belt doing product ownership for an open source product or some kind of volunteer effort that's going on, and have an opportunity to shape that product and then also serve as the product owner there in a volunteer capacity and get some experience that way. So there's lots of different ways to move into a new area of work, and there's a lot of need for product owners out there. So I really commend whoever it is that's asking this question.
Yeah, and I could tell you that when I used to manage a very large organization back at Fortune 100 days, and I actually stepped out of my role, and I always have an apprentice who works with me that I had her step up and take over my position, the director, and I stepped down and was the product owner for 6 months because I felt that it was important if we were going to do Agile and do Agile development and how we were trying to go create process, that I needed a better understanding of that job. And I worked with a bunch of mentors to learn that up. And I could tell you that one, vulnerability, being able to reach out and saying, this is a desire that I have, as you had said, and then finding good mentors to work with you is just absolutely important. Let's see, Skip, are you there?
I don't actually work in product management, but we have been part of interviews. And one of the differentiators when we're talking with people about coming into the organization we already understand the products that we have for whatever organization we're in. We don't really need somebody who can follow that. The thing that would add value is someone who better understands parts of the market that we don't have. So paying attention to the people who are using products and the things that the needs that they have that are not met or not met efficiently, I think demonstrating that knowledge, whatever level you happen to have, may help get a foot in the door.
That's a very good point. And I think this is one of the things I kind of like about mob programming a little bit. You know, when you think about navigators and people who are adding their voice to it. No product owner has all of the knowledge in their head. I've never met somebody that has all that knowledge in their head. So I think it's important for people to really understand that they're developing these skills. It's a lot of it's sort of association with you're more of a synergistic leadership style works really well in this case versus I think the more of the program management kind of bulldog get something delivered model I think is important. Hector, what do you have to add?
Sure, thank you, Ray. I think sometimes we are complicated, but I think if you're interested in these type of roles, what you do is set up, especially if it's an internal approach, you set up an exploratory to the department or organization that you believe that's the one you can want to join, or at least want to be product development, product manager, and you explore what they're doing, what products are working on, what solutions they're working on, what the team looks like, and you get that manager or that boss to get to know you, and then you schedule one, if you can, every 45 days, 60 days, until that person gets to know you well. If an opportunity opens up, you may be that next person. And then make sure that you have your credentials up to date, that you have all your certifications ready, and that you can show that you've done something, maybe not necessarily software development or product related, but you've accomplished certain projects. And that kind of gets you into the door, and it gets you that visibility and allows you to showcase yourself, and you'll be that next person for that interview.
Okay. Yeah, thank you for that. That's good advice. Sheila, are you there?
I think if you're trying to do product development in an organization where you already work, it's a different situation than if you're going into a new organization or trying to get your foot in the door. So it depends on the nature of the product, because I've worked with a couple of different kinds of product. One was in financial services, where it was important to understand the business process. You needed to understand the end customers, but you needed to understand the business process and what differentiated the existing products so that you could develop new products and what the niche markets were going to be. I've also worked in something with the cellular phone company where I needed to understand the physical product and how third parties were going to market for us, not just what was going to happen internally, because that impacted what do we really need to develop. So I think you need to look at the industry that you're interested in doing product development for, and what are the skill sets that you need. I remember there were some people I worked with that were engineers that felt that if you weren't an engineer, you were useless. Well, I wasn't an engineer. But after a while, they were convinced I wasn't totally useless.
That's funny. We found though that, because I've come prominently from an expert-based culture where, the smartest person in the room typically gets promoted to such a job. And that doesn't mean that they're the most qualified person for the job. They just were smart at doing development or whatever that they were doing at the time. And I found that the best model you can do to go grow into this type of position is to have some sort of job rotation program where you are rotating into marketing and sales and to other aspects of not your typical, jobs that you're currently doing. And that rotation gives you a really good understanding of the business acumen that you need in order to be the product owner for a job. And shadowing those people and doing those jobs really work really effectively. But thank you for your comments. David.
Hey, so yeah, great ideas to this point. I really do back up the mentor thing. If you want to do a job like product owner, which is, I think, the hardest job, not only in Agile, but probably the hardest job to do, period, find a mentor and use them. But as far as getting your foot in the door, I think, and you just talked about the smartest person in the room. A good developer or engineer won't necessarily make a good product owner, because I think a product owner needs that passion. To show that passion for the customer and the passion for the product to be able to really translate that into being a good product owner, right? So I think one of the ways you can get your foot in the door is really show that you have a passion not only for the job, but for the job and for the customers. I mean, I spend a lot of time. I've probably done every kind of job in software engineering. I spent time as a support rep. I spent time as a sustaining engineer where I fixed bugs, and now I'm an Agile coach. But one of the things that I really gained from that time when I was a support guy was empathy for the customer and passion for what the customer has to do. And what I found was customers use our products every day to solve problems that we never even think of in ways that we don't know of, right? So you have to have that passion. And I think that's probably the most important part of being a product owner.
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned too, and I noticed that when you're rotating sometimes really becomes important, not just because of learning, but it also because maybe you're just tired. And, the passion, there was a really great PBS show that showed the product owner for the Mars rover landers, the two, Destiny, I think it was Destiny and the other one, I forget the two pair, what their names were. This person was going from jet propulsion lab to jet propulsion lab, and they were just showing the day in the life of this individual and the passion that they understood that if this thing didn't launch by this date, this would become a museum piece. And really just working with these jet propulsion labs to get this thing built. And I remember at the very end of this, they showed the rocket taking off, and this guy's just bawling like a little baby, because he was so deep and rooted into the love of his product. And I think any product owner should actually go dig that special up and go look at it, because I think that really provides a lot of depth of what you should be feeling when you're doing that. Not just that it's you're speaking for the customer. You are the customer in a lot of regards, and I think that's important. We are at the top of the hour, and my goodness, another month has went by. Couple things for you guys to know. The Agile Alliance is booting up a lot more online events and just different webinars and other things as we go through these times where we're socially distanced. So please go up to the agilealliance.org and you can see some of those events that are coming up. I know that we're in discussions right now for people who were at the Business Agility Lab at Agile 2019. We're in discussions right now about how do we go create the Agile Lab virtually. So look for some announcements coming out on that as well. So with that, I will hope that you guys all just have a really great month, and I hope that you and your family are safe. And I really appreciate the conversations today. Lots of great wisdom that you all shared, and I greatly appreciate it. I learned a lot. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.